Right.
So I'll start by saying hello to us. We've got 10 people on the line at the moment. So welcome to the menu engineering in a with clever ways to how to sell more plant-based dishes session, which we're going to start any moment. Sarah, are you going to do a bit of an intro first, or shall I pick up the chat here?
Sure. No, I'll do an intro for you. I've just set it to go live now, so as people are coming on, we'll get started. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of the Nudging Webinars series of 2 with Judy from Right Product, Right Place. Just a bit of housekeeping for the session today. As normal, you'll notice that your mic is muted, but you can communicate with me, Judy, and the other participants in the chat function. The chat function can be found if you hover over the bottom of your screen and select the speech bubble icon. It might be at the top, possibly. Please change the chat function to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see you and what you've written. Please introduce yourself and let us know where you're from. See what the weather's like. It's been quite sunny here recently. There's also a Q&A function which you can ask Judy questions. If she can't answer it straight away, we'll come back to you as soon as we can. And this session is being recorded. It will be in the past events of the professional development event section of the Academy, part of the TUCO website, but you'll need login details to be able to do that. But it will also be available on the TUCO Facebook page. So I'll now hand over to Judy.
Thanks, Sarah. Great to be with you this afternoon, folks, and thank you for joining us. As Sarah mentioned, this is part 2 of a two-part series. Last week's was more of a general menu engineering how-to, and I just wondered if there's anybody on that who is now on today's. It'd be useful to know whether there's any common sort of threads here that I need to pick up on. So if you'd like to if you just put your yes on, if you've got any yes, an answer to that, if you were with me last Wednesday, please just make a note on the chat function. Oh, Lionel, okay, and Emma, thank you. Anybody else? Any other duplicates, as it were? Matthew, Laura, excellent. Okay. We're going to cover quite a lot of the same ground because the guys who haven't been on this before will need to get some of the understanding. So from your perspective, it's going to sort of polish up some knowledge, perhaps from what you gained from last week. And it may obviously give you some opportunity to ask questions. If there was a part that didn't make any sense or you thought about subsequently that you wanted to clarify, please do drop me a line on the chat function, or obviously get in touch afterwards if it hasn't all become clear by the end of the session. We will have a chance at the end to ask questions anyway, but yeah, we'll crack on with the session. So I'm Judy Roberts, as obviously by my title on my little face there. I work on my own as a consultant, and one of my really exciting areas that I get involved with is university catering. My background is catering, and so I devised this merchandising course first of all thought about how customers buy things. The customer behavior is very important to influence how we lay out our spaces. It can make a massive difference. So I devised a merchandising course, which I now offer to universities. And a sort of sidestep of that is the menu engineering side of things, because that uses some influencing skills that you would learn. That's all part of the merchandising, and we'll kind of overlap on that today. I run these online sessions for TUCO, which is brilliant, but I'll also come to site to run individual site sessions with you or your team, depending on what your needs are at the time. I've worked in many universities where they've had new facilities put in and trying to make them perform more financially, or more perhaps as everyone expected in the first place, thinking about queuing and signage and as I say, product layout, because all of those things help to influence how your customers use the spaces that you've got. So that's a bit about me. So today's objectives, though, is all about menu engineering. It's thinking about how to maximize the sale of profitable plant-based dishes using menu engineering to help develop effective menu and product layouts. Now, the drive at the moment is very much that we need to have plant-based dishes front and center in a lot of cases, and that will automatically increase the sales of those dishes. But there's more science behind it rather than just forcing these things down people's throats. We need to think about how we can best make them appeal, and not just to the customer, but also to your financial profit and loss accounts, so that everybody benefits. So what we're going to look at in this session is think about what we mean by menu engineering, to think about whether there's what's the definition of that, and make sure we're all on the same page when we start. Then how do we get on with that? What do we need? We've got to have effective measurement. So what does that look like? What do we mean by effective? Then we're going to think about, when we've got that measurement, what does it tell us? How can we categorize our dishes or recipes to help us then make some better judgments or plans about how we might move them in the future? All of that will help us to improve the financial performance, and we're going to look at how that happens. And then we're going to think about the layout of the counter space that you've got and menus to optimize those sales further. So those who've been on my course last week will see that the principles here are much the same, but obviously we're going to be thinking about plant-based meals in specific cases. So that would perhaps help you to think about how the power of menu engineering and merchandising can actually lift the sales of those areas and make it much more normal to be selling those products. So first things first then, what is menu engineering? Was a definition I have here, which I've got from a company called Lightspeed, which is an American website, but it covers menu engineering in quite some detail. Obviously, welcome to go and have a look at that. It's really focusing much more on a restaurant, a high street restaurant, if you like, places that don't have the same, they're places that have the same menu every day or for a season. So working out how that menu can best perform for you. But the principles we can then apply to a facility where you maybe have much more flexibility in terms of the frequency within that things appear on your menus. So we're talking about categorizing menu items based on their profitability and popularity. So those two things, what they generate for your business and how popular they are for your customers. And we'll use that knowledge to improve the financial performance and bring up the profitability of the overall operation that you're talking about. So Lightspeed summarize the menu engineering definition in a good way. They suggest it's a way to evaluate a restaurant's menu pricing by using sales data and food costs to guide which dishes to feature and their menu price. Equipped with that data, menu engineering involves categorizing menu items based on their popularity, which is what we're talking about, and their profitability. To properly engineer a menu, you need to have a firm grasp on the menu items' prices and food costs per serving and their contribution margin. With that, you can categorize your menu items and see which items contribute with more profit than others and which aren't pulling their weight. And those ones we need to think about how we improve that. What can we do to change it, or do we actually need to drop that dish completely? So in a nutshell, menu engineering is a series of exercises that assure each dish and drink featured on your restaurant's menu is profitable, popular, or both. And ideally both, really, because that means that it's generating interest for your customers and money for you. So what sorts of benefits of using all of this menu engineering might we be after here? What are we actually going to drive? Give me a quick typing of thoughts in the chat function. This is a test of your typing speed or just some keywords. What sorts of things are we hoping to gain from using menu engineering? More profit in capitals, Emma. Exactly right. So yes, that's going to be your driving force, that you're not wasting your effort selling things that aren't generating your either the target or at least blowing your target out of the water. Less waste, says Lionel, exactly, and better sales. So all of those things are very positive effects on your bottom line. Excellent. Yes, and obviously with the plant-based one, Rachel, as you say, we're encouraging customers into sustainable choices. So we're helping them to spot the plant-based food over the non-plant-based food, so that they see that first and see that as their primary choice, if you like. What we see first, we will typically buy. So everything else is going to be compared with that first visual impact that we've had. So benefits of using menu engineering. If I can get my computer to wake up a bit. Improve overall financial performance, weed out those non-performing dishes, provide less wastage overall, which is great because obviously your margins helped there. We've got to, because we have to think about how we're going to change menu items or tweak recipes to make them perform better. That helps to drive menu innovation and be more creative about how we put dishes together. And as a result, time management's improved because we're actually focusing our effort and production on the dishes that generate us the income. I'm just getting my computer. I say happier customers is always good. They become more engaged in what you're doing, and all of that helps to drive a happier team. So it's a definite win-win situation. So if we think, first of all, then this is the starting point of where we're going to be. Effective recipe measurement means that we must have food costings up to date and complete. This always seems a bit of a bind, but actually that is the underpinning of everything, which is obviously something you'd all know, but having them as something you can rely upon, so they are complete, they do cover all of the facts in a correct fashion, then you can actually use that to help manage the finances very minutely. Always use a standard template, because then you'll be able to compare like with like. And all of the weights and volumes need to be in agreed formats, such as kilograms, grams, litres and millilitres. So you choose whether you're doing a decimal point, sort of half a kilo, so 0.5 of a kilo, or whether you're going to write 500 grams. It's important to make sure that you're clear and use the same system throughout. All ingredients and aspects should be included. So garnish, dressings and packaging. So that's the whole cost of producing and presenting that dish for the customer. If you're not charging for takeaway boxes, which is perhaps a more sustainable idea, then you need to be, or there's the other, of course, the other option is, yes, I think that, yeah, it's it's a moot point, isn't it? Because sometimes you end up making people resentful about packaging, but however you price this, you need to cover include the packaging that's going out with that dish, because if you haven't, then you're making losses. So deciding whether you're going to encourage people to eat in, which is obviously more sustainable because then you can use the china and the metal cutlery. If you're able to give people a financial incentive to do that by not charging for packaging, if you like, so not including packaging, then that's a good way of driving customers to stay in, because then you'll start to encourage people. If you start charging people 50 pence or whatever it is for their takeaway cutlery and maybe a compostable burger box or whatever, you've got to include some VAT in that, obviously, so it starts to be expensive for customers. then you'll be helping to keep people engaged in eating in, if you've got that space. But where you haven't got that space and it's a takeaway offer anyway, and it's from a cafe, then you need to make sure that the packaging is included in the food costings that you're doing, so that you're able to charge a price that allows you to give that packaging away. So hopefully that makes sense. Wastage allowance, you need to agree a percentage of what's reasonable, depending on your site and the spread of services and hours that you're open. And always include the number of portions that you're making. And ideally, that should be the same in every recipe, because that makes it so much simpler to do the maths, if you like, to compare dishes against each other. So thinking about how well dishes perform, we need to consider various factors. First of all, how many are sold? Is this a good thing to put on the counter? How many are we likely to sell? Or how many are wasted? Perhaps that's even more pertinent. Should we be doing them to order as opposed to having them out on the counter? What's customer feedback like? Can you watch the plates or the returns to see what happens, what comes back? And is that helping to indicate whether this is a waste of time to do again, or whether actually it's just too spicy, or any other sort of aspects that you might gain from talking to customers is all valuable. The other aspect that we must consider is how complex it is and what's the impact in the kitchen of producing that dish. If it's something that you spend a lot of time doing and it's using a lot of space, and it's actually better to outsource it, I don't know, make production of sandwiches, for instance, that's a balance to be struck. But also things like fish and chips, and we'll talk a bit more about that later on, although I know this is a plant-based session, there's an impact about the other items on your menu. So if it's something, for instance, like fish and chips, then that's a big impact throughout the whole of service in terms of production. It's a continual thing. You haven't had a load of, you can't batch cook it and have it under the counter. It's going to be a continual thing to keep on top of. So thinking about how practical something is to produce is all part of this complexity issue. And then think about the current food trends. So the healthier and lighter is a big thing, and especially in the summer, obviously. Higher quality and the premiumization of dishes, and being able to potentially trade up so that we can add things to something, and personalization. When we've got a bit more money, we as customers will perhaps choose to have the toppings or the extra something or other that goes with a dish. And obviously plant-based. So if we're trying to influence people to eat more plant-based food, we need to make it really obvious within the space where you work that that's your first offer to customers, that's the thing that you really want them to see and enjoy, try, give feedback on. You'll tweak it and you'll work with them to make sure it becomes more and more popular. So all those performance factors need to be factored in. So then when you think about a menu here, so we've got very straightforward menu on the assumption that your menus are not 100% plant-based. If they are, then obviously you're only going to sell plant-based food. So to some extent, you've got a similar situation where you're going to do the calculation, work out what the cost price is of everything, and then think about which is the one that you really want to focus on, and that's the dish that needs to get the extra love and be given pride of place on your counters. But here we've got a mixed menu with the assumption that we want to sell more plant-based burgers. At the moment, they're quite low featuring. We're only selling 60 compared to, obviously, fish and chips, or the fish bit anyway, with the chips separate, is a high number sold, and it's what I would call a pull product. It's what's bringing customers to the restaurant, but you can see its percentage margin is really low, and actually every one of those will pull down the overall profitability of the space. It is generating a big amount of profit. You can see that's the largest amount of profit of the dishes that I've highlighted. But it's, if you are able to refocus those sales in the other areas, the chicken curry even, because that's generating a good return, and the plant-based burger, then you will be able to achieve an overall better GP, not necessarily at the detriment to sales. If you think about how much things cost and how you adjust your recipes. So it's all a balance, but having this sort of information gives you the ability to start what if scenarios. So this is the example then we're going to be working with throughout this session. So from that, we then start to categorize dishes. And this is where the menu engineering information comes in, really. This is where this is the sort of standard that anyone who knows about menu engineering would expect to see. There are 4 areas, 4 types of categories that your dishes are going to fall into. And they, on this scale, so we've got popularity along the bottom here, and we've got profitability up the side. So they go from 1 to 3, and they're called star because number 1, obviously, it's most popular and it's the most profitable. So that's a positive within your menu. The puzzle, number 2, is high profit. So it's great for you to sell, but actually it doesn't sell as well as you'd like. So those things you need to work on how you're going to make that more profitable for you overall. It's high profit, but if it doesn't sell, then it's not actually pulling its weight. Number 3 is the plough horse. It's very popular. As you can see, it's high on the popularity scale, but it doesn't generate you much income. So we're going to have to think about moving that low return to make it a higher return. And then in the bottom corner, we've got the dog. Doesn't sell well or make you much money. And that's the one where we need to think, is it worth selling, to be honest? So we're now going to look at, I'll just give you some icons that I've used further on. So some obvious icons there. So now we're going to put that, our example here. We're going to use the number sold per week and play that against the profit in pounds per week. So that gets applied into this graph. Now, it's interesting here that the battered fish is way ahead of the others in terms of being a star compared to anything else. But as I say, there's a balance to be struck there because it's going to be a high maintenance dish to serve. It's quite a battle to get the 200 pieces of fish battered throughout service. And maybe you've only got one fryer. All those things need to be taken into consideration. The chicken curry, it's generating good profit. I think you saw that was 70%, so that's doing well, but it's not selling as well as the battered fish. And if it did go into star territory, then you would start to really make some better bottom line. Then we've got the plant-based burger, which is our main focus for this session. We need to get that to be a star. We need to make it sell better and generate more income. And then we've got the side dishes here, which are just an illustration, really. You obviously would have a much broader menu than this and a much more complicated set of information from your graph. But we've got the large chips, which is showing as a dog section. And so then we need to have a conversation about whether we keep that on at all or how we deal with that. And then the chips are popular of this small and the medium, but they're not generating much income. So how do we get that improved as well? So if you can get all of those working up towards the star area, then you're definitely going to improve your bottom line. So the outcome of all of that is that we've got a dog for the plant-based burger, a battered fish that's actually a star, even though the gross profit is low because it sells so well. The chicken curry is a reasonable performer, but it's not as good as it ought to be. So that we call that a puzzle. And then you've got a couple of plough horses, which aren't really pulling their weight in terms of profitability. And then you've got the dog, which is the large chips at the bottom. So once you've got all of that information, we need to think about how we're going to improve the financial performance. Let me just keep us on track. Okay, so there's various options here. Now we're going to think about how we'd move from plough horse to star. So the plough horse was the 2 chips in this instance. So we're going to try and improve the margin. We're going to add some value and increase the price. We could review the portion size. We could reduce the overall food costs by adjusting the recipe. We could simplify the production method. We could retain as a loss leader. So if something's really popular, but it doesn't generate you masses of gross profit overall, it might be pulling people into the facility where you are. It may be seen as something that you can't really do without. So such as chips. And if you're feeling that the overall production, the overall financial performance is okay, then, and you don't need to adjust these, then that's fine, because they are still going to be popular, that you haven't alienated any of your customers. Moving from puzzle to star, then we're going to be increasing popularity. So what sort of things are we going to be looking for? How are we going to do that? Anybody got any thoughts about that? Because we need to try and work out how to increase the popularity of something. What's a really good way of doing that? Anybody got any thoughts? What would make you choose something as opposed to another item if you went out and saw it on a menu? Make it part of a meal deal. Indeed, Emma. Although I know that you might have decided that from our previous discussions that was good. Make it central. Yeah, absolutely. Highlight all that stuff, Simon. That's all good. Yes. So those are good ideas, definitely. So in order to make it an offer, yeah, so you're promoting it there, Anna, exactly right. So you actually make much more of it. All that is all perfect solutions for this challenging one, the puzzle. We've got to increase the value perception. So yes, making it much more irresistible for people is important. So that's where we're talking about the meal deal. Change the name. Perhaps maybe it's not described well enough on the menu. If it's something that you're maybe it's new and people aren't really familiar with it. Does it need some kind of explanation? And typically you might find that some vegetarian dishes, I don't know, something like a vegetable curry might fall into this area, because it would generate you good profit, but actually doesn't sell as well as you might want it to. So thinking about how you describe it is important. So if you've got some more descriptive words in there regarding the type of curry it is, to maybe pin it to an area of India that it's inspired by, you'll create much more interest in it, because it'll become more something that people want to find out about. Promote it, which is something we've said there, and ask for feedback from those who order it to see what makes them choose it, and that might illustrate how you can influence others to buy it. If it's something that's something that you could remove from the menu and forget and never do again, without alienating your customers, then that's an idea. It's a very good solution. You might want to focus your attention on other dishes that are producing you the return that you want. And if it is not very popular, then there's a very small damage potential, if you like, for the customers that who would be potentially disappointed next time when they were expecting to see it. If you're moving from dog to star, on the other hand, this is where at the moment the plant-based burger is sitting. So that's a bit of a challenge. We don't want to lose it, because that's the obvious thing, is just to take it away. We need to make sure that we get better return from that. So has anybody got any ideas about what we need to do with the dog to make it much more of a star? Yeah, I like that, Harriet, using buzzwords such as homemade and local. That's a good idea. That really helps people to see if something's got better value than not just a standard thing. So that's a good improver of something's visibility, which is always worth doing. So advertise the benefits of eating plant-based, absolutely. So we need to make sure that customers appreciate the plant-based impact on the environment and on their bodies as well. If you're proud of the particular contents of the dishes that you're preparing or buying in and reselling, make sure customers are equally aware of the benefits. So advertising is a good point. So then what some of the other aspects that we can do are things that are common to both the puzzle and to the plough horse. We've covered them before. So obviously, ideally remove from menu, but we're not going to do that with this in this case because we need to have the plant-based focus here. We're just not quite doing it right. If it's a loss leader, and sometimes things like kids menus in high street restaurants, those won't make them much money, but they may well be worth keeping because they draw in the parents for full price main courses and that sort of thing. So free food in the supermarket cafe for children up until 6:30 or something, as long as for every adult dish, and that sort of thing is diluting the overall performance, but ensuring that they get business in the early part of the evening. So making sure that those loss leaders, if they're loss leaders, they can be retained, and you're just going to have to swallow that, if you pardon the pun, that it's not actually generating you masses of profit, but it is working as some kind of a hook to get people in. And it's one of those things that places like Marks and Spencer's use with their meal deals, maybe advertised outside, and you can do this yourself. You advertise some hook that you think will entice people in, but once they get inside, we distract them with the things that we really want them to buy, so that you don't quite manage in Marks and Spencer's to formulate the whole meal deal because you've chosen something that doesn't actually fit into it because that's what you've seen first. So thinking about how you've laid out your spaces will help to distract people and attract attention elsewhere. So if we go back to our example when we've talked about these dishes that are some challenges there, the plant-based burger of particular focus in this instance. So what I'm suggesting is that we make it a meal. So various things, actually, it's a combination of effort here. So we make it a meal so that we increase the selling price. So overall, it's a better margin. So instead of 63, which on this previous one, it's now 65. And we've got a selling price of £7.95. We're making it into a more of a meal in some way. We're also going to give it more prominence, and that means making sure that it features on the top of the menu, first thing that customers see as they come in, and we'll talk about those key aspects shortly in the next section. The battered fish. Now, the 38% is the challenge here. If it's causing you a problem in your kitchen, we need to reduce the numbers sold. So the effort here is being targeted at the plant-based burger. So we're now selling 100 more a week than we were. So the battered fish has dropped by 70. So we need to think about how that happens. How that happens is that you position them differently on the counter. So the plant-based burger gets all the focus, and the battered fish it's that thing like Marks and Spencer's meal deal. It's the hook that people have come in for potentially because it's Friday or whatever the reason might be, and they're habitually going to maybe choose that. But we trip them up with this fabulous display of the plant-based burger before they get to the fish and chips, and that way you influence the split between the purchase choices. Chicken curry, we've increased the perception of value, but increasing the GP, improving the visibility on the counter. will again drive that up. So what we're talking about here is shuffling the order. So if you've got a linear counter, you're talking about having the plant-based burger first and the fish at the end. So that prioritizes in your in physical terms which dishes it is you want to sell. So the most the one you really want to sell should be on the first counter. For chips, and we've got small, medium, and large. We decided to knock the large ones on the head and remove those from the menu. It's not worth mucking about with that, and we'll just increase the selling prices of the other two sizes. Now, because they're in a captive audience, your customers may resist initially, and you'll find maybe the sales drop off, but chips will sell. So to some extent, the price is almost, it's not irrelevant, but it's something that you need to be less sensitive about because customers are with you and typically they won't go off somewhere else at that point. So once we've done that, we then look at the graph again, and lo and behold, plant-based burger is up there in the star territory. Chicken curry has also made it to the star, so we've now got 2 stars, and the battered fish has pulled down into the plough horse. It isn't a dog, it's because it's popular, so you don't want to get rid of it, but you've made the impact of the 38% gross profit of that less damaging because you're going to sell less of them. The chips as sides are never going to produce you masses of profit here. They're still down in the plough horse area, but the numbers overall are more sensible. We've got a better performance. So the effect of that in this example is that we have increased gross profit overall from 53% to 60%, which is a 7% increase. Now they talk in some of these the websites and people who will help you to refashion your menus that you can get up to 15% difference from before and after. In my experience, it's perhaps not quite as much as that, but you will get a financial benefit once you've categorized your dishes, because it will allow you to see which dishes to focus on. So if you're focusing in a strategic manner around those dishes, you will achieve some better gross profit overall. So it's always a balance, because you're the fish and chips is so popular as a dish nationally. You don't want to get rid of it, but it doesn't generate you masses of income. So actually making sure that you're less interested in it shows by the fact it's put at the end of the counter, and you've put all your focus on the plant-based, puts the plant-based dishes front and center and gives much more attention to those, so they become more of a habit and help people to sort of leave the fish and chips habit behind. So then we're going to think about the counter layout. So using all the information that I've just said, I think you're going to be familiar with how I'm going to do this. But first of all, we're going to think about the influences that are exerting themselves on our customers as they come into our spaces. What sort of things will influence what people choose? Things that you can't necessarily control. What kind of outside influences will be impacting? Let's get the chat more visible. Here we go. So the weather, absolutely, Rachel. Yeah. Anything else? What other things make a difference, make an impact on what people choose? The cost, yeah, indeed, and that might vary across the month or during the term, depending on how people's spending plans are going, and that will impact how much people are willing to spend. Ease of access, absolutely, Lionel. Yes. So how simple is it to get into the space? If they are any kind of physical challenges, are they not happy with the crowds? How does it impact on them? And can they reach products easily? Those sorts of things will make a difference. If it's lunchtime, absolutely. So time of day is important, and the prices of everything that you've got on your menu will make a big difference, as Arelson says. Time of day and time of year, yes, that's true. The exam season must make quite a difference to what people choose to eat and whether they're in even more of a rush than they were before, or whether they just need brain food at that point. Yeah, keeping up with everybody else and what everybody else is doing is important. And obviously, people's ratings and reviews will really influence us these days. So there's my summary of the items that we've come up with in the past over the course of all of the courses that I've run. So peer pressure is a big thing. And if the group that we've gone in with, for instance, decide they're all going to have meal in to eat in, then that will influence how we behave. And we thought maybe we were just going to get a sandwich and go, but no, we'll stay and eat with everybody. And if you can encourage people to center their thoughts on plant-based food, then you'll find that they're the like-minded people with them, their friends will want to get involved. And we all love that, the places that have a bit of a queue. You don't want too much of a queue, but having said that, you're still going to spark some interest and some nosiness, and we can't resist seeing what it is that we don't want to miss out on. So invariably, I see it in street food markets, particularly when you walk down the street and you can tell which of is the most popular, and therefore you judge the best because it's the one with the longest queue. And it's amazing how long people are happy to stand in the rain waiting for that particular product that they've set their heart on. So building that kind of impact visually that people then are drawn to is that's a really powerful thing. So making the most of what you're doing with some promotions and displays is a really positive thing to add into your armory. So come on, computer, that's it. So there's other things that influence choice, which we can't necessarily control. It's about our anatomy and how we've evolved. We have two eyes, and they're definitely at the front of our heads. We don't look at the side. We tend to look straight ahead. We have two hands, and they operate in quite a limited area, really. While it might spread a couple of meters if you're tall, it's not much to think about, and our visual impact of what's in front of us will have the biggest say so on what we choose to buy. Our brains, one brain full of information, continually bombarded with stuff, and that will mean that we need to make our messaging very simple to get through to that customer's addled brains and the thoughts that they're having about the meeting in the afternoon or how this morning's gone. So we want the thing that's right in front of us. It must be easy to reach, and it must be very familiar and understandable, because that all helps impulse decisions. So making sure that we've helped our customers to find the plant-based food by putting it in the hotspot, make it simple to understand and easy for them to take action, because it's well packaged, it's beautifully presented and well priced. So thinking about counter layouts, then you prioritize your space to sell the products that you want to sell. So once you've done this exercise of menu engineering, or even before then, before you start that, because you consciously want to sell more plant-based food, make sure the plant-based food gets the prime spots. Identify the hotspot, therefore, on each counter and suss out which way the customers come from, what they're going to see first. It won't necessarily be straight in front. It might be slightly to the side. So make sure that your presentation doesn't get in the way. It actually enhances, however you've displayed these things, enhances the view as people approach from their typical way of approaching. Think about what they're going to see first and what's at eye level. All of that will sell first. So making sure that you've got the dishes that you want to sell most of in those spaces will make sure that you sell them. So stars and puzzles are going to go in the hotspots, and any less visible space that's where your plough horses go. Position associated impulse products close by to improve spend and profitability. Now, with stars, bear in mind labour/equipment limitations too. So if you've got a star that sells really well but is not generating you much money, if it's easy to produce and it's great because it just ticks over, and maybe you can have them in the hot counter, in the hot cupboard to be brought out onto the counter very simply by the service staff, then that's great. Carry on with that. But if they do require lots of labour from the back of house, think about how you can change that. Maybe simplify the recipe process, or the way that the dish is put together to make it more cost effective, because you don't want to spend loads of labour on something that's not generating you lots of money. So if we've got a long counter, where are we saying the hot spot is going to be? Laura, that's fine. Yes, cheerio, and thanks for joining us. So where's the what's the hotspot going to have on it, and where's it going to be? Top, yes. Well, I know that's true to some extent because it is at eye level. But where are we talking about? Which counter? Because the customers are coming from the left-hand side. Bottom left. Absolutely, Emma. Indeed. So what? Yeah, yes, you see what I mean, Iona. That's great. Yes, thank you. So we're talking about eye level being at the top of the counter. As Ian has mentioned, but the place for the puzzles and the stars is that bottom left-hand corner, because that's where we're talking about a hot counter here as an example. So that's where your puzzles and stars will go. Eye level's on the top, and that's where the upsells will go. So anything that's ambient that goes with that is perfect on the counter, because it helps to illustrate how customers are going to be able to enjoy this dish. Excuse me, plough horses at the far end. So if you optimize your layout, you're going to get better sales and gross profit, easier production and kitchen support. You're going to have higher turnover of the dishes that you want to sell, which means better presentation, rather than something being sort of getting ignored and left so that it gets a skin on or something. Making sure that this dish that you really want to sell looks amazing on that front counter. Customer service is more efficient because there's less queuing. You've make sure that the dishes that you sell you can keep up with. It's the best use of resources, so that you end up with your best use of your space, the food costs, and any labour. So you've got less wastage overall. Just get the customer there. That's it. And customers and team happier, which is obviously our goal from one of the first slides. So now we're going to quickly look at menu layout. And in the last, this is the written menu. So in the last session, there were a few people who gave out table service menus. So I'm just going to go through this with the same thoughts, really. If you've got a written menu, and often we have a written menu, it's often on a intranet these days, of course, or you may actually print it off for people as they come into the restaurant. 7 dishes max per category for fixed menus is important, because it helps people to choose much more quickly, less queuing, and makes it simple to understand. All plant-based, or so you have the menu is all plant-based, or highlight the plant-based. That way you will sell more plant-based. So either of those. If it's 100% plant-based, you obviously will sell more plant-based. But if you want to have a more sort of equal opportunity to the non-plant-based dishes, and to help those people who don't want to eat that or would like to choose something different, if you're highlighting the plant-based, then you'll still sell more of those. Have a mix of stars, puzzles, and plough horses on your menu, a range of prices, and don't list in price order. That's really important. So don't have the most expensive at the top, cheapest at the bottom of any course, because customers will appreciate, we'll get to know that, and there will be choices made because of the price. So mix it up. Descriptive language, as we talked about earlier, aids understanding, especially among non-vegan customers, if you've got a particular dish that you want to help customers feel is more inclusive. Great description sells. So we talked about this a bit earlier as well. So any of these sorts of descriptions just add more to the dishes that you want to sell. You don't have to use it everywhere. Obviously, if you use it everywhere, it becomes wallpaper. Use it on the dishes that you want to highlight, that you want to sell. Anything that you put onto the menu, particularly I'm thinking about plant-based items, may be less familiar to people who aren't vegan. So making sure that the language that you use helps people to want to try it, that it breaks down the barriers of the not knowing or the prejudice. Really, having tasters perhaps is one way of doing it, and doing some kind of opportunity for customers to try before they buy is a great way of letting people into the new dish. If you've got stars on your menus, as we talked about, that's what we're aiming for all throughout. Use a box or different color. Make sure it stands out. Have a larger font is another thing you can do, because we will read that first. Give it the prime position, and it's on this example here, you can see that all the vegetarian dishes are listed first, and you could do that, obviously not in price order, make sure they're mixed up, but making the focus on that, because there's there'll be a reading fatigue which will set in, if you like. So one of those top 3 dishes might well generate more sales than reading further down the list, for instance. Don't highlight the price, so don't have them all in a single column like that first example. Make them as part of the text that you've written, and consider whether actually you drop the pound sign, because it's less disruptive within the flow of the writing. It gives the facts, but it's maybe seen as unnecessary and always catches the eye, so it's quite a good idea not to use it. Mix up the order of prices, as I mentioned. When we read a menu, we make a decision, because we start sort of roughly at the top, not necessarily reading the top line, but we will start at the top. With it, it's a one panel, so one list. We don't order as much because it looks quite limited. With two panel menus, so 2 columns, that evokes a feeling of plenty of choice, and yet still is easy for us to read. But then that's the sort of sweet spot. The more panels or pages you have, the harder it is for customers to read. And we might all have been to places where like drinks menus, sometimes you go to places and they're like 30 pages long, and that you've already probably ordered your usual, whatever it was, from the bar. So making sure that you're not bogging people down in too much information makes it very difficult for customers to focus on the thing that you want to sell, and that you prefer that they buy. So here's a quick illustration. So we start, if you've got like 2 panel or 2 column, we'll start reading on the right hand column, and then we'll drop. The last thing we will read is the bottom of the left hand column. And if it's a single page, we'll start at the top and we'll read, but maybe not make it as far as the bottom before we've made a decision. So keeping your information succinct and to the point, focusing on the dishes that you want to sell. So that's where your plant-based section would go. It would be the green, where the green dots are. So we're going to make sure that we've got the financial performance of each dish. That's your first step. Identify the hotspots in your space or menus and use them for the dishes that you want to sell, all the plant-based ones, in other words. And then lay out products in the order that you want to sell them. So the stars and puzzles get the prime position, and it sort of fades off, if you like, down the line. So you might find, in actual fact, that you've got even less requirement for selling that dish that doesn't perform well, and you can gradually fade it away. Excuse me. Make sure all of your plant-based dishes achieve stars and puzzle minimum, really, in terms of their performance. Supporting role for associated items, make sure you've got those available, because they will apply to people, particularly if they're feeling a bit more flush at that point and thinking about the time of the month or during the term time, and where the people are likely to be more well off, if you like. That gives you more opportunity to sell those. Plough horses at the end, get rid of the dogs. So I've got a quick few-minute quiz to go through here. So if you don't mind just giving me one letter answers to this. There's 10 questions, and that hopefully will cover a lot of distill a lot of thoughts in your head as to what we've learned. So what's the goal of an effectively engineered menu? Which of those? Couple of minutes. A, says Emma. Any other answers? Everybody? Oh, yeah, everybody's consistently there. Lovely. Increase profit and happy customers. Good. Right. So which of these categories are you aspiring to reach for all of your dishes? C. Nice. Yeah. Okay. Which of these methods would not help you to improve the popularity of your dishes? Of a dish, sorry. B. Yeah, absolutely, Simon. Well done. Which of these categories sells well but doesn't generate you the return that you want? C. Absolutely, folks. C is definitely the answer here. Well done. What's the best way to deal with a dog dish? Unless it's a plant-based dish, of course. A. Yep, that's right, folks. Well done. How can you improve the percentage margin of a plough horse? Choose up to 3. So these are options, and you might find that not many vegetarian dishes fall into this, but let's see. A, B, and the rest B. Yep. We're actually not wanting to necessarily sell more of them, so because that doesn't improve. It improves the overall margin of that dish, of course, but it doesn't improve the overall margin of the whole operation. So that's why we've dropped that one. Any of the others will help to increase the margin of the dish. What should you not include in your food costings? A, says Anna. Absolutely, Anna. Well done. Vague quantities, that's not helpful, because one person's pinch is another person's splash, or vice versa. So making sure that you're being really clear in grams or spoons, milliliters, that's worth doing. Why is it important to use a standard recipe template? Choose up to 3 on this one. A, C, and D. Absolutely, Anna. Quick off the draw here. Yes, that's right, folks. So what we're not needing to do is keep everything tidy. Obviously, that will be the end result of what you end up with, but really that's not the driving force. These are the other aspects. So well done. What 3 things do you need to start engineering your menu more effectively? B, C, and D, says Emma. And Simon. Yes, exactly right, folks. So staffing rotas, it's not initially, that is not part of the analysis. We do need to think about the implications on staff once we've analysed all of the products, and then we think actually this product is not pulling its weight and it's heavy on the staff. So that's where the staffing part comes in. But at the initial part, you just need the information about the dishes. So last but not least, why is it important to consider how much labour we use producing a dish? B and C, absolutely, Simon, and that's a good point actually, because it's quite a bit ambiguous. The main thing is because it is part of the overall profitability. But yes, if you know how many, that's all part of it. If you know how many people that you need to produce the menu, that will determine whether you've got an effective operation or not. But it's all part of the big sum. So the action plan is to review your menu dishes. So that includes thinking about all of the costings and whether you've got them all comparable with their units that you're using and how many portions that they do. Review your sales data, then you categorize your dishes from that, and then you can start to plan the action to take with each item. So recipe changes to improve the profitability of plough horses. Reposition on the menu or the counter those puzzles to help those drive more sales. You can remove some of the dogs if that's the best way of dealing with them, but not obviously plant-based ones. If they're plant-based and they're sitting in that section, then we definitely need to improve their popularity. That's the first step. Get them to sell better with a better offer so that customers can't resist them, and then you'll help them to drive up towards stars. And update your menus and counter once you've done all of those. So, are there any questions from you guys remaining? I'll probably talked you all into oblivion, and it is 3 o'clock, so you're probably all wanting to set off for another cup of tea. And all it remains then perhaps is to thank you very much for your attention today, and to ask you if you wouldn't mind, if you'd be kind enough to leave me a review. That would be good if you could scan that little box in the corner. But otherwise, do get in touch with me if you've got any questions via Sarah, if that's simpler. And we will be sending out a hard or electronic copy of these slides so that you can use them as a reference tool if you're sharing any of this information with team members. But thank you very much for having us, and I look forward to seeing you on another occasion. Thank you. Bye-bye.